With this video, I'm going to be covering the writing process in general. This is the process we're going to be using over the next few days to get through the classical Greek tragedy essay. Now, we'll be taking time at each stage, but I want to give you an overview with this video. So let me give you a little bit of background first, okay? The first thing is to understand what the writing process is all about and why you need to follow it. And it's not a maybe or something that just other writers do. Everybody needs to follow some type of process. Now, with writing, any kind of analytical writing, you're not doing one thing. You're actually accomplishing several different tasks at the same time. You are thinking up ideas, you're organizing those ideas, you're developing them, you're constructing grammatical sentences, you're revising those grammatical sentences, you're putting them into a certain context, following MLA and all these other things. You are doing several different tasks. And now what you have to understand is that the first thing is that there is no such thing as multitasking. If you think there is, then drive on the freeway while texting, and I think we know what will eventually happen. Not very good stuff. You actually do something called switching. It's a cognitive switching between one task and another. And it means you don't perform any one of the tasks very well. So what your brain does is switch from one task to the other, to the other, to the other. And it can do it fairly rapidly, but it cannot do multiple complicated tasks at once. It can't do that. It has to change the context, what's called the cognitive context, each and every time. And what it does is it ends up doing each task poorly instead of doing all of them well. Now, if you're going to go through your writing and you're thinking up ideas, organizing those ideas, developing those ideas, writing those sentences, and doing all those other things, you're going to do them all badly if you try to do them all at the same time. So what a writing process allows you to do is use the limited amount of processing ability that you have. If you've had Psychology 101 already, you'll come across a term called working memory. This is basically a term to describe the processing ability of your brain. It's the ability of your brain to handle a task and to handle, so many complicated tasks at a time. Everybody has a limited amount of working memory, and it basically doesn't change, okay? It doesn't change throughout your lifetime. It essentially solidifies around age 12. It's quite similar to the concept of IQ. Most folks, your IQ does not change at all over the course of your lifetime. It solidifies, and that's what it is. The thing that changes over your lifetime is you gain more knowledge, but you don't gain more processing capacity. You cannot do more things at once. If you could, then 80-year-olds could text and drive and I don't know, probably practice their skateboard tricks at the same time, but they can't. So your working memory is limited in its capacity, and it is essentially genetically determined. So if you don't have much working memory, just, thank your parents, I guess. But anyway, so what a process does is it breaks the tasks down, the larger tasks, into manageable pieces. If you're looking at a writing process, for example, you're going to handle one thing at a time, thinking up ideas without worrying about formatting. Okay, constructing the sentences and refining the sentences without worrying about, the MLA works cited. You're going to do one thing at a time. This is done, and it's really shown very well in math problems. When you learn how to do a math problem, what the math teachers do is they break it down into stages, one step at a time. That's what math does very well. Okay, most people wouldn't look at a huge, algebra problem and try to come up with the solution. Writing an essay is usually far more involved than, doing most math problems, but folks have a hard time getting used to the idea that you should follow a process, but you really must do it. And once you learn how to do it, you're going to handle each aspect of that larger task. You're going to handle each one far better. Now, a big thing to keep in mind, you have a number of threats to your working memory. Okay, if you try to do too many tasks, if you're trying to sit down and just write the essay in one fell swoop, something's going to break. I've had over the years a lot of students write just grammatically just ridiculous sentences over and over again. And when I show it to them, they go, oh my God, yeah, that's awful. Well, what happened is they were concentrating on the ideas rather than on the grammatical structure. Something had to pay. And when I do get a lot of clean essays that were written quickly, usually the ideas are very unsophisticated. Something had to pay. So doing too many tasks means some of them are going to be poorly done. That's just the way it is. So don't do too many things at once. And I'm going to guide you through a process of doing one or two things at a time. And how you can do too many things at once is to leave too little time. So give yourself time and get the early stages done. You're going to find the later stages going okay. Okay. Having fear of a poor outcome, that's anxiety. It's an emotional issue. It actually takes up working memory space. If you've had the experience of having bad essay grades in the past, you are kind of set up for what's called writer's block. Writer's block really doesn't exist. What it is an anxiety. It's an anxiety, and it actually takes up working memory space. It makes it harder to write, and then you don't write very well, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that fear does it. And I will tell you this, the anxiety doesn't just go away. What you've got to do is start getting used to handling it. I always say it's like having a kid. You just got to get the kid to sit down by your side. That's your anxiety, while you focus on the task at hand. You get used to working with the anxiety, okay? So everybody's at a little different stage. Some of you who have anxiety are probably sitting there nodding right now. It doesn't go away, and especially telling somebody to relax just makes it worse. But anxiety does take up working memory capacity. What you're going to have to do is start early and get used to writing poorly in the early draft stages. And that's perfectly fine, okay? And I want to emphasize that. So a lack of confidence, confidence is developed with good results. It takes time. And one of the things I'll tell you a number of times during this semester is to be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself as you develop your writing skills. And I really want to emphasize that. It might take a while. There's a very good chance it's going to take much longer than this semester. For me, it took years, okay? I didn't get any solid grades in my writing, my college writing, for more than 4 years. Isn't that kind of scary? But yeah, it took me years. So you will almost certainly develop more rapidly than I did. But be patient with yourself and watch out for your dog. So what I'm going to tell you is that writing an essay is kind of a lot like putting a pumpkin in a garbage disposal. You can't do it, right? Well, yeah, you can if you slice it up into pieces. If you break the pumpkin down into stages and do it one at a time, one piece at a time. And it's very important to know that everybody's going to break their process down somewhat differently than other people. I write a good deal and I write differently than other people. That's perfectly fine. But what I do is I break it down into stages. And what I don't do is I don't worry about how stupid some of the stuff is that I write. That's one thing. Get used to, get comfortable with feeling stupid. If you don't feel stupid, you're not learning anything. And I know it kind of sounds goofy, but I'm dead serious about it. If you don't feel stupid, you're not learning anything. Okay? That should be a bumper sticker. But anyway, back to the pumpkins. Okay, stages, the stage before the stages, reading first. The big thing to do at the very start, why we haven't really talked about writing until now, is that I've wanted you to focus on getting Antigone done. At this point, you should have Antigone done, okay? If you have not completed the reading, you're not ready to write. You're not ready for this yet. You've got to make sure you finish the Antigone, have written your discussion posts, and I would urge you to go back and look over other people's discussion posts so that you have a very good handle on Antigone. Okay, so be familiar with the text and the different possible ideas that could go on with this. So there's a real difference between, and you may have written these essays before, the what did I do for my summer vacation? Those things are easy to write. Why are those so easy to write? Because the knowledge, the facts, and everything else that are going to go in the essay are readily available to working memory. They are easy to call up. It is not difficult. When you get to academic and professional writing, you're dealing with a very different world. This is not about what you did for your summer vacation. Okay? This is about analyzing Antigone right now. Or later on, it's going to be about making projections for, the upcoming sales report. It's going to be about analyzing, I don't know, something from your physics class and making predictions on, whether or not a bowling ball or a tennis ball is going to drop faster if you drop them from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. My physics majors know the answer to that. But anyway, so there is a real difference in academic and professional writing. The material is much more sophisticated, much more difficult to work with. In order to gain that familiarity with the material, you have to spend time reading it and working it out and making sure you understand all of its nuances. That means understanding Antigone, the reading, thoroughly before you start writing about it. Okay? Don't start writing until you know the play and you understand the skill of breaking down metaphors. Okay? So find more than you need. Okay? Find more metaphors than you need. You're going to need a lot more material that you could work with than what you're going to work with. You're going to be sorting as you go through the stages. Working through the stages is a process of sorting as we go through, and you're going to find some things work better than others. And that's why it's so important to overread and overunderstand. It's going to be easier to write later on if you work harder earlier on. The later stages become easier. Okay? And then you're going to, as you go through the process, focus on what works best. Okay? Now, in the first stage, when you actually start writing, one of my bumper stickers is slow thinking is good thinking. You'll hear that from me a number of times. And it's very important to understand that. What analysis basically is, what critical thinking is, it's slow thinking. And one of the things I've noticed over the years, and I've been teaching for so many years now, is that this generation now is a much more rapid thinking generation. That shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody. With the nature of online communications and social media and everything else, and it's also a generation that's much more familiar with language, but at a very rapid pace. And now I want to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's actually kind of cool. But it doesn't always lend itself to slow thinking. What you need to do is learn how to shift gears when you need to. So I want to make it clear, there is nothing wrong with rapid fire conversations online. That's what good humor is usually built on and other things. And that's all great stuff. But when you're working on analysis and critical thinking, it actually comes down to being able to slowly break things down and take it apart piece by piece. So one of the first things you're going to do is be writing out your quotations. And I'll be walking you through that in the early draft stages. Writing out your quotations. What I'm going to do from the early stages is not ask for a thesis. Now, some of you are going, but my high school English teacher. Let's not talk about your high school English teacher. Okay? I'm going to reverse the order for analysis. I'm going to ask you to hold off on your thesis for a while. If you have a thesis, just let it float in the back of your head. That's okay. What I want you to do is find 4 good quotations of around 3 to 6 lines. Now you have, at the discussion board, have been finding 3 metaphors in the early 2 scenes, then the next 2 scenes, and then the last scene. You should have about 9 metaphors. And I'm going to urge you to try to go back and find the 4 best ones out of those 9. You can see what I did with you is I had you go through the first reading stage and find potential evidence for your essay. That's what you should have done. And look for those quotations that are about 3 to 6 lines in length. You need enough to work with, okay? If you get those little tiny quotations that are 1 line long, some of you did, and that was fine for the discussion area. But now for writing the essay, you want quotations of 3 to 6 lines, and get 4 of them, and then write them out in the sheet I'm going to give you, the PDF. And use the early stages of the metaphor machine. That's what we're going to be doing. You're going to be describing what they're actually talking about and explaining what's going on in the metaphor, what's behind the fancy language. And then you're going to tell us what kind of language is he or she using. What language is this here that Antigone's using to talk about this situation? She's using these types of words. Okay. And then you're going to shift gears into your critical thinking or your analysis. Instead of putting the evidence down and describing it, you're now going to shift gears into your analysis. And this is the critical thinking. Why are these words and phrases important? What do these words and phrases tell us about Ismene? What do they tell us about Haman? What do they tell us about Creon, about the Choragus, or about somebody else? That's going to be your analysis. Why are these words important? You're not going to be making very general important points about the history of the world and those Greeks and all the time throughout space, and don't do that. You're going to be making a very specific point about what Ismene is doing at this stage, in this point, okay? So don't worry about your writing in the early stages at all. Remember what I told you about that putting a pumpkin in the garbage disposal? You can't do it all at once. You're going to be chopping it down and doing it into pieces. And what we're going to focus on with this is getting our evidence and getting the foundation of our ideas. We're not going to worry about formatting, MLA, about the citations, about the construction of the sentences. You're not going to do that. When most folks do this, their early draft stages are what are called independent clauses. Subject, verb, modification, subject, verb, these are tiny little sentences. These are the kind of sentences we speak in, and they're choppy when you're writing them. For now, they're fine, okay? You're not going to worry about it. We're focusing on one aspect of this pumpkin. The rest of it, we'll get to you later. We'll chop the rest of it up later and get this through the garbage disposal or the blender or whatever later on. One thing at a time. Early draft stage here is going to be focused on the evidence, okay? And generating your ideas, generating them. Second draft stage, what I'm going to walk you through is setting the context of your quotations, refining the descriptions bit. Notice the focus is on developing and organizing and things like refining. The core ideas are already there. You did them at the early draft stage, okay? And if you're a visual learner, look at that pumpkin, and now look at that pumpkin. Yeah, there you go. It's more refined, processed more. You're going to focus on developing what you have written already. You're not going to come up with more sentences necessarily. You're going to add to the sentences you already have. A little bit on the types of things you can do, and I'll talk about this later on as we go through the process. Grammatically, what you can do is add things like prepositional phrases. To the store, under the bridge, across the street. Those kind of prepositional phrases can be added. Dependent clauses, things like when he arrived at the theater, after the movie had ended, okay, before we climbed the fence. Those are dependent clauses, okay? And then you could parallel the verbs, okay? Oedipus spoke to his wife Jocasta and gave her flowers on his first arrival. There, I just paralleled the verb. Talked and gave. You can parallel your verbs in the middle draft stages. In the early draft stages, you don't worry about those kind of grammatical constructions. And again, notice, we're not trying to do this all at once. I don't want you thinking up your ideas and writing your original observations while trying to construct sophisticated sentences. I don't want you to do that. You're going to crash. Something's going to break. So we're going to break it down and do one piece at a time. So we're going to put an introduction together after we've refined what we've already done. So notice this, it's kind of backwards. A lot of you have been taught to write your introduction and thesis and then go find your evidence. What I'm going to ask you to do is get your evidence first, develop it, and you're going to discover your ideas while you're doing that. You're going to discover funky things, neat things you didn't know about Creon or Ismene or Haman or any of those others. You're going to find it through the writing. And you're going to come up with your thesis after you've written your body paragraphs, refined them, and developed it. And then you're going to go, you know what? This is what's really going on. So notice that discovery, that real discovery of your thesis, happens after you've developed and refined the ideas based on the evidence. So you're going to put a thesis together at the end, at the end of the middle stage, of the second stage, okay? The final stage is going to focus. Look at that pumpkin pie. See, it wasn't a garbage disposal, it was a puree machine where it's time to eat. So you're going to read over what you've written, and you're going to use, this is a Hemingway quotation, because anybody who knows me knows I would never use naughty language. You're going to use your built-in shock-proof shit detector. This was what Hemingway said all good writers needed. It was this ability to read over what they've written and decide, I like this, I don't like that. That's good, I'm going to take that out, I'm going to adjust this. It's just reading it over. Probably the best thing to do is to listen to your writing as you're reading it. And oh boy, you find stuff in there that just sounds wrong. And it's very important not to worry if you're an expert in grammar or not. You don't have to be. You have a built-in shock-proof shit detector whether you knew it or not. And it's that sense, that inner sense of what works and what doesn't. And I really want you to trust that thing because it got Hemingway a Nobel Prize. And I think it can get you through English 101. And it's going to be a matter of trusting your ability to find things. Will it be perfect? Probably not. But it's probably going to be quite good. And what I've learned is that students need to trust themselves more rather than doubt themselves so much. So trust that shit detector a little bit more. It's not always perfect, but generally it's probably going to guide you in the right direction. And I'm going to be putting up a checklist at the end, and you could check it at the end for all your MLA stuff and all those little doodads and everything else. But notice, a lot of those things that a lot of students worry about early on, don't worry about them until we get to the end. Okay? Those are mostly superficial things. They are how we put our essay together and format it and make it look so nice. But they do matter. I want to be very clear. You've got to put it together right. There's reasons for that. And it makes a very fine impression, and it makes this stuff easier to read. But we're going to worry about it at the last end, or at the end of the writing process. We're going to take care of the earlier stages first. Okay? So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to be I'm going to be writing my own essay. I'm going to go through that with you guys. So look for that one coming up. Go over this. This is just to set your expectations over the next few days, and get ready to write. All right? Take care, guys.